All right. And we are live. How's it going? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome, welcome. All right, we'll give it probably maybe like 30 seconds or so. I'm not going to wait super long, just to let people jump into the session here. We've got a really, really awesome set of data points and slides and folks joining us from all around the world. We got someone from Hawaii. And people have joined these sessions enough to kind of know what the drill is. So we got Genesis from Hawaii. We got John from St. Paul, Iowa, Delaware, Wisconsin. All right. Brazil, 2 a.m. right now. All right. We got people all over the world. We've got Copenhagen, Boston, Calgary, California. I'm here in Los Angeles, so not too far from you. Boston College, Columbus, Ohio. All right, why don't we jump in? It's 10:01 here in LA. Everyone, welcome. My name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder here at UpKeep. I'm going to be your host today. The plan for today is to share some brand new data from the State of Maintenance report that we just finished putting up together. Um, So what I'm going to do at a very, very high level is just share a very broad, like, here's where we got responses from. It's across a few different industries. We'll give like a demographic report and then ultimately get into the findings. So if you joined me and us last time, you got a quick snapshot. Today is all about doing a deep dive into the 214 maintenance teams across a very, very wide range of industries. And what we did was we took these 214 responses and helped drive a snapshot of where things actually stand heading into 2026. All right, so that's the plan for today. A few quick housekeeping items before we get going. This is going to be roughly a 60-minute session. We're going to send out the full replay tomorrow. So if there's anything that, I missed or you know, stepped out for coffee, we're going to send the full replay out. Don't worry about it. Also, if you have any questions at any point, use the Q&A box. It sounds like, yeah, we've got several repeaters here, so you kind of know the drill. Use the Q&A box. I'm going to try to go over all of the highlights of the report. And then as you have questions, just feel free to drop them, as the questions come in. We're going to reserve some time at the very end to answer as many questions as we have time for. All right, we've already done this, but if you haven't joined us before, this is a live session. So let us know where you're going to be watching from for today. Drop it into the chat. And we've already got like so many different people all over the world, from the Netherlands to India to all over California and Dayton, Ohio. So um, welcome, 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 welcome. Thanks for joining us. All right, as part of the session today. It's not just going to be a monologue by me because that would be terribly boring. What we've also got is a special guest coming in later to talk about what AI adoption actually looks like in practice. So we've got like a pretty jam-packed agenda. It's going to be hopefully very, very insightful. So let's jump in. All right, the next slide here. Before we dive into the findings, I want to give everyone a little bit of context on who we surveyed. The survey consisted of over 200 maintenance and reliability professionals across a broad swath of industries: manufacturing, facilities, food and beverage, fleet, healthcare, and so many more different industries. So, the report that we sent out and these findings cover a very diverse set of industries across a very diverse size businesses as well. So as we look at size of companies, this survey covered 42% were small businesses, 31% were mid-size, and about a quarter were either large or enterprise organizations. So it almost feels like it's a third, a third, a third across small, mid-sized, large businesses. Half of our respondents manage about six or more locations. So again, we're getting quite a diverse set of multi-site complexity in this data set. We have responses from maintenance managers, facility managers, we have technicians, we have reliability engineers. So it really isn't just one perspective. It's a very diverse audience from both the field worker to the C-suite and everything far in between. So again, just trying to set the stage for who was in this report, and hopefully you all realize like this is quite a diverse report across hundreds of different responses. So you're going to see some interesting patterns, and they're going to be cut across different industries. But what we found cutting through all of this data, once we peeled back all the noise, was that a lot of the problems that we found aren't industry specific problems. Instead, what I think they are is systemic. It's across multiple different industries. And I think this is happening at an industry level, not just a, size of company or, single industry. All right, let's dive into the 2025 headlines. Because before we can look at what's new, I do think that it's worth grounding ourselves in what we found out last year in 2025. Man, I can't believe it's 2026 already. So just kicking us off, the three big headlines of last year's report, because we do this every single year. We've been doing this for the past 8, 9 years now. The first headline from last year was that one in three maintenance teams still relied on manual methods. So this is either, you're still using paper and pen, clipboards, Excel spreadsheets, sticky notes, radios. A third were still using manual methods to manage and maintain your operations. And so that's even with all of the technology available, it's still a third of the industry was running on manual processes. The second big headline for 2025 was that over 80% of teams either sustained or actually increased budgets in 2025. So this was projecting this positive industry growth heading into 2025. There's a lot of optimism. You had resources that were flowing. The industry, at least from last year's report, felt like it was at a good place. So again, we'll talk a little bit about how that's changed this year for 2025 and heading into 2026. And then the third big headline of the 2025 maintenance report was that 90% of teams considered maintenance to be either very or extremely valuable. But what we also found in this report of last year was that only half of teams planned the majority of their maintenance activities. So again, the belief in the value of maintenance was there, but the execution was an entirely different story. So these were the three main headliners that we found from last year's report. All right, next slide. Heading into this year's report, we're going to go over four new takeaways, four new major themes that we saw from this year. So I'm going to highlight each one of them, and then what I'm going to go do next is we're going to do a deep dive into each one of these four. The first key takeaway that I want to cover for the 2026 State of Maintenance report was the execution gap. So teams know what good looks like, but they struggle to execute consistently. We've heard this before. This is not new, but there are interesting insights that I'll deep dive into in just a little bit. The second theme that I want to cover is the contractor myth. This came up in 2025, but maybe the quick punchline here is that outsourcing did not solve the labor problem that we had expected. And then the third one that I'll cover is AI readiness and the gap of readiness to reality. So expectations right now for AI are very, very high. But right now, the foundations to actually implement practically are not across most teams. And lastly, the fourth key takeaway is the talent crisis. This has come up almost every single year. Hiring is harder, it's difficult, and the pipelines to attract new incoming talent is just not keeping up. So here's the thing. I actually don't believe these are four separate problems. Instead, I think they're all connected, and they're all connected as symptoms of a very similar same system. And so by the end of today's session, what I hope to do is break down how they're all intermingled and ultimately what we can do about it. My goal here is, have everyone leave with a few action items that they can bring back to their plant, facility, and team. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to start breaking down each one of these key takeaways one by one. If you go to the next slide, the execution gap, we're going to start with takeaway number one. The industry knows that there's a problem. They know what to do, but we just can't consistently do it. The strategy is there, the intent's there, but the day-to-day reality is that most teams still end up in a reactive mode. We know that maintenance is important. We know that maintenance prevents fires and reactiveness later down the road. This showed up loud and clear in the data in the reports. But the data in the report, basically, all of it behind it says that 90% of maintenance professionals recognize the value of preventative maintenance. There's near universal agreement. So this is not the problem. The problem is what we actually see in practice. So 90% of teams know and recognize the value of preventive maintenance, but 75% of teams are either mostly reactive or describe themselves as quote unquote balanced. There's only about a quarter of teams that are either mostly or fully proactive. So what does this mean? What is this highlighting? It's highlighting a big disconnect between the importance of maintenance and actually taking action on it. Where does this disconnect come from? Staffing constraints, you have scheduling challenges with production, you have training gaps. But here's another like interesting stat that came out of all of this data is measurement. Only 22% of responses said that they can actually demonstrate clear ROI to leadership. Without measurement, without being able to clearly showcase ROI, ultimately maintenance operates in an accountability vacuum. Every budget conversation becomes political. It's not analytical. So it goes from saying, we think maintenance is important. Show me the ROI. If we can't back it up with actual hard metrics and data, again, each conversation becomes political. And so here's the thing about this nuanced word of balance that we had in the report. Again, this was, a small portion of people that said their maintenance activities are balanced. It sounds reasonable. Balance between being proactive and being reactive. Being balanced seems reasonable, but I think in practice, what balance means reactive wins whenever production pressure shows up. And guess what? Production pressure always shows up. The gap between 90% believing that preventative maintenance is important and 25% actually practicing it, this is the defining challenge that we have. So this isn't all new. This has existed in previous reports. We know that this conundrum exists. So what we wanted to do in this year's report is go one step farther and actually start to explore, ultimately what separates the 25% who are actually proactive with the other 75% that believe it's important that don't get there. I think it's three different things. The first thing that people do differently is they build measurement systems. Again, this is very important. You build measurement on ROI that leadership trusts. And the teams that do this very well is they have 3 to 5 KPIs that connect to business outcomes, and they create a cadence around it to review it weekly. So again, this could be PM completion. It could be mean time to repair. It could be response time. It could be reactive to preventative ratios. They set 3 to 5 KPIs and they review it on a weekly. And they align with leadership to ask them, hey, does this align with the goals of the company? The second thing that we quote unquote, the winners do here that get to the other side of going from reactive to proactive, they design governance that protects planned work. So in the very in the very ever-changing operations of a production plant where you're always being pressed for production. What the winning teams do here is they create protected maintenance windows where, as important as production is, it doesn't bump maintenance and they track when it happens. They track these protected planned work maintenance windows. This is key here because when production issues show up or production times get pushed, there's this increasing pressure to give up those maintenance windows. The best teams protect them. And lastly, what these teams do is they connect maintenance to business metrics that leadership cares about. Again, this is kind of dovetailing off of one and also two, actually. You can, once the teams are able to translate what preventative maintenance actually does to increasing uptime in dollar terms, that helps them connect the what you do to why it's important. And it's not just saying we want to protect maintenance windows because this is what the schedule says. Instead, they say we want to protect maintenance windows because this is the impact to long-term uptime, reliability, reducing downtime. All right, takeaway number two now. The contractor escape hatch didn't work. So in previous years, last year particularly, there was a very strong narrative that contractors would solve the labor crunch. We were hoping, we could outsource the problem away and hire contractors to solve the hiring gaps and, skills gap, training gap. But what we found, at least in this year's report, was that the data suggests otherwise. Let me pull out some actual data from the report. Last year, 67% of companies and teams said they're turning to contractors. This year, contractor usage stayed exactly flat. And so here's the paradox. What contractors are good for, they're good for, and they're mostly used for specialized skills. But this is not going to solve and fill any large labor shortages, which is what we're seeing right now in industry. They're not fixing headcount problems with contractors. Instead, contractors are being used tactically. Businesses understand the challenges of hiring contractors only. It's, you get inconsistent quality, you get higher long-term costs, and every single time a contractor comes in, they leave, that's knowledge loss. And so the big myth around outsourcing the labor problem away, this is I think what businesses are realizing is that you can't just outsource your way to reliability. What reliability truly is it requires deep knowledge of very specific equipment, your equipment, understanding how the assets interact with one another, what it does. And I think the key takeaway here is that the capabilities and this knowledge lives in the people and the organizational systems. And you can't just purchase it. You can't just outsource it through contractors. If this is a problem, solving it through the contractor escape hatch is not going to, ultimately be the long-term solution. I think this is what ultimately, businesses saw and realized over the past year. All right. So again, what do winners do differently? What do companies and teams do differently that have, quote unquote, figured out how to use contractors to supplement the labor shortage? The teams that are doing this, and this is also a very important part of almost everyone that we surveyed, they're being very intentional about how and when and what jobs they bring in contractors for. They bring in contractors only where specialization is needed, not to fill this large headcount gap. They do require knowledge transfer. So when you have contractors come in, they actually have internal technicians shadow and they push that documentation is required. Again, this is very important because when contractors come in, do work, and then leave, if you don't have that knowledge, stay within your organizational system, you lose so much of the benefit of having contractors come in with skilled in specialization. And then ultimately, the best teams, they take a lot of these savings. They take savings and they reinvest it back into the internal employees. Again, one form factor of this is through internal technicians shadowing contractors and, specialists. They ultimately take this and drive training and development internally within their own existing organization and business. And then when it comes back to business outcomes, it's not just total cost, including, internal team versus contractors. They also track things like rework, knowledge loss, and then ultimately the coordination overhead. I think it's very easy to say, hey, I can hire a contractor to do this one very specific job. On paper, it might look like it's less expensive, but the best teams look long term, and the best teams also account for the coordination overhead and not just the hourly rate, not just the service contract. So largely what I would say is the escape hatch didn't work because ultimately you can't buy this institutional systemic knowledge. All right, the third takeaway from the report. 75% of respondents, of teams, expect AI to drive margins, but most teams are not ready. I think there's more excitement than ever. There's more just overall excitement for AI, what it can do, what it might do, especially as it relates to solving this labor challenge. But right now, the gap between AI expectations and AI readiness is, I think, one of the most remarkable findings in this year's data. So here's what we found. There's external research that shows 75% of manufacturers actually expect AI to become one of the top three contributors to improving operating margins in 2026. So this is what external data says. Our survey tells a very different story about where the industry actually is. So again, this disconnect between hope and external research and where people currently are with AI. All right, most teams aren't using AI or are just only exploring it. So again, we ask this question, like, are you using AI? How deeply penetrated is it within your organization? Most teams are not. Most teams are using it at a very, very surface level or just only the tip of the iceberg here. About 6% of respondents say they have widespread integration of AI within their business. So again, I just want to call out this disconnect. 75% of manufacturers expect AI to become one of the top three contributors of operating margin. Only 6% of respondents have widespread integration within their business. Okay, there is a portion of, I feel like people, industry that is skeptical about AI. But I actually think that most businesses and workers, they actually want AI to work. So I don't think the barrier here is enthusiasm. I think the biggest barrier is actual readiness. So then we ask them this next question about data readiness, and you said how rate your data readiness. Is it, poor, underdeveloped? Is it fair? Only 6% consider themselves as well prepared on a data readiness level. This is very important. So 6% of companies are well prepared. 6% have widespread integration. This is the key to AI. Your AI, your insights are only as good as the data that they sit on top of. So this again was very important, this data readiness. If the foundation of data is incomplete, it's inconsistent, it's unreliable, then ultimately AI will match that. It'll also be unreliable. It'll also be incomplete or inconsistent. The data the systems, the LLM, the AI will only be as good as the data that it sits on top of. It doesn't matter how sophisticated the technology is, it will only be as good as the data that it sits on top of. All right. Most AI pilots fail because of this exact reason. What we see time and time again, teams get excited. You define this very broad pilot. You discover, all right, shoot, systems aren't ready, data isn't ready. You layer AI on top of it, you get some like very ambiguous results. And then what we see so often is there's this conclusion AI isn't ready. I actually don't think that the problem is AI capability. I actually think that it's because we're oftentimes trying to build on a foundation that isn't ready yet. This is very important. If you want AI to succeed, you have to layer it on top of high quality, high trusted data. All right, so what do the, quote unquote winners do differently? What do the 6% of companies and teams and individuals do that have this widespread AI integration that will see better margins this year? What we see is it's hard to boil the ocean. So the 6% actually they start oftentimes with one workflow, not a big, broad initiative. They say, I'm going to pick one process, whether that's work order triage, PM scheduling, parts forecasting. And ultimately, they gather all of the data that's required to help optimize that one workflow. Before jumping into these very broad-based initiatives on, AI for the whole company, they focus on a single workflow and they fix the data quality issues first. They make sure that the foundation is solid because ultimately AI will amplify whatever input that it receives. So bad inputs will equal bad outputs. And again, they start more narrowly. On top of that, they ultimately define success metrics up front. So you measure outcomes, not just we're using AI. This is another common theme that we heard across, the respondents of our survey. They said, we're being successful because we're using AI. That is not the goal. The goal is still business outcomes. How does it reduce downtime, improve uptime, increase production? How does it make a better experience for, your team, your customers? The goal is not just to quote unquote use AI, but turn AI into actual results of a company. All right, what else do? They integrate AI into existing workflows. The best implementations of I think, are actually invisible. Technicians just start to notice suggestions that are helpful, and actually, like, it doesn't get branded as AI. And so, just to summarize here, they start with AI that really, just works in the background. On top of that, they start with tools and workflows that can actually improve the data quality issue that they have. So these are things like, auto classification, suggested failure codes, prompts for missing information. It actually, they use AI to actually fix data that feeds future insights. This is what teams are doing differently. And so, yeah, again, just to summarize here, those that have made this work, they fix workflows first. They use AI to scale execution. And I'm really excited to bring in one of our guests in just a few minutes, Selina, who I feel like, Selina, you and your team have done exactly this. All right, the last takeaway here, and then we're going to get into our guest speaker, is the talent crisis. The talent crisis, I think, is partially self-inflicted. This workforce crisis is real. It's well documented. It's something that we've talked about for, I feel like exactly every single year over the past 8 years we've done this. I think a lot of it is actually self-inflicted. All right, let's get into some of the data here. 64% of organizations find that talent attraction is difficult. That's 10 points up from last year. So It's harder, it's every single year, it's harder and harder to find new talent that wants to come in. Um, and you have like external forces that are just compounding this. So they say by 2030, you're going to have millions of jobs unfilled. 40% of the workforce is retiring over the next 5 years. So again, you're seeing a large labor shortage. You're having more people retire. But the self-inflicted part that I talk about is 21% of organizations said in this year's survey, they make zero effort to engage the younger workforce. This is a big problem. They don't have apprenticeships, they don't have school partnerships. There's nothing to build the future pipeline of workers. And I get it. It's hard to do training. It's hard to train the workforce. It's hard to run apprenticeships. But if we're consistently relying on someone else to train, pointing the other finger, we don't look internally, it's only going to compound the issue over a long period of time. 64% of companies' respondents have found that it's hard to hire. But again, 21% make no effort to build a pipeline. So the self-inflicted part, some organizations are suffering from this hiring problem, this difficulty in hiring, and also contributing to this compounding problem through inaction. And obviously, this all compounds. Hiring is difficult. Teams stay understaffed, morale gets strained, workers leave, hiring gets harder. There's this never-ending cycle. Because when this happens, when hiring gets difficult, you continue to make knowledge transfer ineffective. There's more retirees, over 40% over the next 5 years. This is institutional knowledge that walks out the door, and there's very little plan to actually capture it. This is not just a 5 year problem. This is not just a 10-year problem. This has been going on every single year since we've been running this report, and it feels like it's only getting worse. Um, yeah, I can't express this and emphasize this enough that organizations that are going to wait is just you're going to compete away with this shrinking pool of talent with very little pipeline. So, um, the best teams right now, those are going to be the ones that are actively building their pipeline. All right, so what does that look like in practice? What do the best organizations building for the next 5, 10, 15 years do? They're building structured apprenticeship programs. You have, these curriculums, programs, you have progression milestones, you have and that ultimately creates pipeline to go out and hire. The best companies, they're partnering with technical schools and community colleges nearby. They want to become the employer that the students coming out of these vocational schools know about and create a brand for themselves. On top of that, they're investing in retention just as aggressively as they are in recruiting and building the next pipeline for future talent. So the best teams, they're monitoring morale, they're reducing friction, they're creating career paths, because this is ultimately what people want. Um, on top of that, what the best teams are doing, they're industrializing knowledge transfer. So again, they're creating job plans, troubleshooting guides, they're doing mentoring relationships. And ultimately, like arguably the most important thing is, retention. They're trying to make the work itself more attractive. So instead of saying, hey, just do this one more thing at the end of your day, you just want to go home to have dinner with your family. They're trying to implement tools, technology, AI to cut down the workload. They're adding mobility, they're simplifying workflows, and they're trying to drive better respect for work-life balances. So there's less, night calls and midnight wake ups. So if there's one thing to highlight here as a bright spot, workforce training is prioritized 3-to-1 over AI investment. So yeah, there's so much hype around AI. But we're kind of like asking, how do you prioritize this? Well, what's more important right now? Is it workforce training? Is it, technology and AI? 3 to 1, people have said that they're going to prioritize the existing workforce training over, some flashy new technology like AI. And right now, what's happening is leaders understand that the constraint is people, it's not technology, and they're prioritizing that. The best company, the best teams, what they're doing is, using technology to help supplement people and not trying to replace people with technology. All right, so those are the 4 key takeaways. What I'm gonna do is just like quickly preface. We just scratched the surface of what the report actually goes into depth with. Um, I want to see if I can like tie all of this together, and then we're gonna get into our guest speaker. Yeah, the 4 different problems that we looked at, the 4 different themes that we talked about, they can seem they can seem like 4 separate problems at the surface, but I actually think they're 4 symptoms of the same execution problem that we have. Let me explain what I mean by that. And basically, what I mean by this is the execution trap that we fall into is every team knows we care about preventive maintenance. We know that maintenance is important. We start with a plan, but what happens with that plan is you have reactive work interrupt it all. You start your Monday morning, we've got a plan for the week. Monday afternoon, reactive job comes in. It interrupts everything. So you say, hey, that planned work that we had Monday afternoon, it's going to get pushed. What happens then is you skip the documentation. When you skip the documentation, you degrade data quality issues. Why? Because we're so far behind already. It's Monday afternoon. When you have data quality issues, your reporting becomes less trusted. That 22% of people that said they had difficulty reporting ROI on what we do, that got pushed out the window Monday afternoon. When that happens, leadership confidence just falls. When you can't very clearly define this is the ROI and this is the importance of the work that we did outside of just pure, putting out fires, that's when reporting becomes less trusted. That's when confidence fails. And that's ultimately when budgets get squeezed. Why? Because we cannot actively, appropriately convey the ROI of maintenance because we've just been pushed out every single month, every week, every day. And then it doesn't stop there. Budgets shrink, hiring gets harder, the team becomes more reactive because you're pressed for time, and then ultimately the cycle repeats. And so this is kind of like again, number one, why it's hard to actually take action on that plan that you set on Monday morning, which is takeaway 1. Takeaway 2 here was that we had was contractors aren't going to solve this issue. They're not going to fix this systemic problem. So this hiring escape hatch through contractors, it does not fix contractors do not solve the knowledge gap. They don't solve, the systemic problem that started on Monday afternoon. And ultimately, if you don't have the right data, this is why AI can't read good data. It's because the data is a byproduct of this broken system or the bad data that you have in your system that got pushed out, that documentation step that got pushed out on Monday afternoon. This is all feeding into, AI that doesn't have a good foundation. And ultimately, the first 3 steps here, it's ultimately why the talent crisis will continue to accelerate unless, we do something about it. We have strained workers, that knowledge walks out the door. So if there's one takeaway, just one takeaway from today, it's fix the system, not 4 separate problems. Okay, that's like a lot of me talking. That was a lot of me monologue. I know that we had some great conversations and some Q&A. I'm going to try to get to it, but what I want to do is bring on our guest speaker because we covered like the findings at a very, very high level. We're going to send out the reports. So you have all of the data breakdowns by company size, industry, in the full works, what I want to do right now is bring in someone who's living this problem every single day. So thank you, Selina, for joining me and us. Just a quick background on Selina. She's a maintenance supervisor, over 20 years of hands-on experience in construction, facilities maintenance, and repair. Um, our team, it's been absolutely incredible working with you, Selina. It's awesome to hear about, how you've been using UpKeep Intelligence, and NOVA. Uh, this is one thing that I want to say about you and your team, Selina, is you do not just talk about AI transformation. You actually have integrated it into your daily workflows.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us. Maybe before diving too far in, could you just quickly share a little bit more about your background and what your day-to-day looks like?
Here at this company, currently it is, I was getting all of the data into the upkeep system and just working with getting like we were just pen and paper, everything was just caveman style, I guess, for lack of better description. And for the first little while, all I was doing was entering data. And I would ask Nova here and there for a little assistance. I was just typing away is all I did. And I finally just bit the bullet and asked Nova one day for a little help comparing two of the lines that I had that were similar to each other. And it came back with this awesome report about where there were holes in what I had entered. And I was like, hey, let me do that. I was like, can you apply those? So it did. And then I said, well, let me push the envelope a little more. I was like, let me just throw data at Nova. So I took all of our past records and the books with the items in it, and I just like did this huge dump of data. And I was like, hey, what can you do with this, Nova? And I talked to Nova just like I'm talking to you. Can you make me items? Can you add this to inventory? And it came back and it had a very thorough list. It was wonderful. And I haven't typed anything really. I mean, I'll hit, yes or no sometimes, but other than that, I just dump a bunch of stuff into Nova and I ask Nova for help, and it has changed. My work-life balance is a lot better now, I must say.
That's awesome. Again, that definitely checks out from the report and some of the findings that
Yeah.
we've heard as well. And it's pretty incredible too, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
AI is getting better every single day. And I think what I heard you say, Selena, was like, at first you started out with like you weren't, I think all of us weren't really sure, like, what can it do? What can it not do? And then you keep
Yeah.
pushing it, you keep asking it for more and more, and it sounds like you've been just surprised every single step of the
Oh,
way.
absolutely. Yeah. There were a couple instances, and I don't want to claim it as user error, but it probably was at where I would hit a hiccup or something and I would just go, and there's a little reporting button underneath where you ask nobody to do things. And I would, say, give it a one, it's like a 1 to 5 star, and you can give it a one and then, say what the issue that you ran into. And then they'll like instantly, I think it wasn't even a day, probably the same day, where they would be like, oh, this is the issue you're running into. And either the crew over there would work on what it was, or they would help me through, understanding the process. But it has just grown and gotten easier and easier. And literally, it's hitting the microphone button. That is where, I mean, if I need to analyze any data, I can just say, hey, Nova, all of the preventative maintenance that we did over the shutdown, can you tell me what the budget was and how much of that we spent, and how much went to contractors? And Nova just, it can actually put it on. I can take it over to a Word document. I can print it out for a meeting. It's awesome. Life
Yeah.
altering. Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
there anything that surprised you when you're like, pulling insights and reports from Nova? Was there anything, that really stood out or, surprised you about your data?
Well, it actually, we started with not the best, but just from putting everything in and the new data that it's entering, like how much it's grown just from adding. So I know you were saying the issue with building it on top of inconsistent data. Well, until you start building it, your data is going to remain like that.
Yeah.
So I'm just, so it's really surprising at just how much it has improved from just, and the technicians, they have a tablet now, and they go and they're like, oh, I changed this, I use this part, and it keeps up with the inventory for us.
Mhm.
We have highs and lows entered into it, so it lets us know what we've ordered, how much that costs. I mean, you can find anything out about a task that is handled right there on one platform. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear you say, Selena, was like the importance of high quality data is ultimately driving these great insights. But what it also sounds like you're doing is you're using Nova and UpKeep Intelligence to actually help you get better data into the system. And when you
Oh,
don't have
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
That's incredible. I love
Yeah.
that. And maybe, obviously you, the whole team over there, it sounds like you really adopted, AI and Nova, Upkeep Intelligence. Did you feel like you had to make any workflow changes before, it started to work for you? Or was it like pretty easy adoption for your team and yourself?
Well, in order to get us to a place to where we were actually able to do the preventative maintenance task, we did like a 2 week shutdown, and we brought all of the equipment up and just did this huge dump of maintenance on everything. So that when we actually started using, it was to the point we we don't have as much of that reactive work cutting into it, because we took those 2 weeks and we did all of the
Mhm.
oil changes, and we just, bit the bullet and said, all right, we're going to just handle this first. And it really, so that was pretty much the only change as far as the way it was going before, but it cut down on a lot of the reactive issues that you would have to deal with, and we're actually able to focus on the preventative maintenance more. I think
Yeah.
that was the only difference, was that we just took those 2 weeks off and went through everything with a fine tooth comb and just prepared for it, I think.
Yeah. So maybe what I also heard you say was it wasn't this like perfect structured data. You actually had it sounds like a lot of unstructured data, and you kind of like took all of that. You did this 2 week preventive maintenance cleanup,
Yeah,
took all of this unstructured data and used that as like the basis to build
that's
on top
exactly what
of.
I did. Yeah, that's
Um, and,
exactly what I did.
and this is the beauty of AI, actually. Like, I think there's a misconception that data and data quality has to be like extremely structured and it has to be in these exact rows and in these columns. But what AI is really good at actually is
I
a lot
can't
of
hear you.
unstructured data. It's a lot of like, oh, I'm gonna just take a picture of this, a PDF of that, and upload my like yeah, few emails. And it actually helps you take unstructured data and turn it into insights, like structured insights. And it's actually very good at that.
Oh, yes. Yes. I've been turning a wrench, all my life. So to move over into the supervisory role, it has been intricate. And I guess AI might be training me a little, as far as I mean, it does, because it's a huge gap from going to turning the wrench to actually keeping up with
Yeah.
the data and entering everything in. And it has babysat me through the process, I guess. I mean, it gave me a good idea of what is valuable to keep up with. And I mean, it really has, I'll be like, oh, do you see any issues with what I just entered? And it was like, oh, well, I don't see the cost of, and I'm like, oh, you're right. So, I'll go and find the cost. I'm like, here you go. And it was like, yeah, that's all you needed. Yeah.
Incredible. Okay, so this is actually a really good dovetail on the next question here, which is trust, right? Like, I think that AI and Upkeep Intelligence Nova is getting so good to a point where it almost does feel like, I'm being taught by it. But
Yeah.
then how do we trust it? Because there are also these instances of quote unquote hallucinations. Was there a specific point or time where you felt like, okay, actually, it's getting really good. I can trust this. It's not hallucinating. Was there a specific turning point? Is it more gradual? Do you feel like you and the whole team are there yet?
Well, I think when I found out about the reporting, button and giving it 1 star and saying that, I instantly,
Mhm.
as soon as I do that, then they're able to help me with it. Any issues or bugs that there have been were instantly dealt with, and it took trusting, and there's a backup. You can actually go through everything that you've asked Nova to do, And if you want to make changes, then you can
Yeah.
ask Nova to, give you a data point from before, or you can even ask Nova to notify you before it makes changes. Like you don't have to just throw everything in there and just hope for the best.
Right.
It gives you options to how much control. And I have over time slowly, let the reins go because I gained that trust, and I know that there's a backup. I don't have any trouble anymore.
Right. I think what you mentioned, Selena, is exactly right. It's, you're talking to Nova and you're constantly questioning it, asking it questions and asking it to prove the data that is showing you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that this is also another interesting misconception that a lot of people have. It's not just, ask a question, get one answer. You have full conversations. You can test it.
Mm-hmm.
You can pressure test the results of, each one of the insights that it comes back with. Have it bring up actual data points that prove this or disprove that.
Yes.
Um, so that's really cool. Thank you, Selena.
Yeah.
Um, in the report, we talk quite a bit about ROI and showcasing ROI to leaders. I'm kind of curious, like, have you like where do you see the ROI, the value of Nova, of Upkeep Intelligence? Where is it actually making your day better? And how do you translate this into value that you could show, your boss's boss?
Well, before Nova, I couldn't show any of that because I just didn't understand it, But now at the touch of a button, you can ask for any financial specs, time. It keeps up with my maintenance crew and how long it takes them on a task. It literally it marks every aspect of it. So no matter what corporate is asking, you can just go and say, "Hey, Nova, we need a breakdown of this," and I just poured it over and it'll put it. So I click it on a Word document, and any information. It's actually I wouldn't be able to accomplish it at all
Yeah, or
without.
you would, and it would just take, hours and hours to do,
Yes,
and you've
any
got
typing
fires
takes.
in the plant, and
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean it's pretty incredible. You can also be like, hey, I got asked this question. Can you help me like write up a response, back it up with data pulled from Upkeep, and then draft an email that I can respond back with? It's that
yeah.
good.
It is. It really is.
All right. Thank you so much, Selena. This is
You're
awesome.
welcome.
Maybe the last question that I'll leave us with is, if you were talking to someone, a maintenance manager who's, heard a lot of the AI hype, but hasn't really started yet or seen the results, what would you tell them about where to start?
Um, I would tell them to pick one process. For us, it was preventative maintenance. And we just decided to start uploading all of the preventative maintenance. And I would tell them just to pick one point that they wanted and try it out, and just see what happens. And they'll get hooked, I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt. No matter what you decide to use it for first, whether it be
Yeah.
your stock, your inventory, to even just reorder stuff. We don't have a parts clerk right now, but I put my minimum and my maximums, and it'll have a little number over there notifying me, "Oh, we just pulled this off the shelf," and then I can ask Nova to put the data into a requisition form so I can print the requisite. It does everything for me. And
Yeah.
that was just from the preventative maintenance. So just try one part and you'll be hooked. It will change everything. And if you
That's
already
awesome.
have it and you're not using it, yeah, it won't take long.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you, Selena. And again, like, everything that you mentioned really does lead back to the report and, seeing the same exact patterns that other teams are seeing, but also just hearing your success on how you got out of this
Yeah.
vicious feedback cycle. Like, it's really awesome. Congratulations on all your success. Thank you,
Thank
Selena,
you.
for coming on to join us and share
No
your
problem.
experience.
Thanks.
All right. All right, let me close this out and then we'll see. Oh shoot, we're running a little bit behind. See if we can do any Q&A. I'm gonna close this out. Uh, we started today by sharing four different findings. I want to share like what the way out is. The report breaks this down in detail, but the system, this is the system that we need to ultimately change. It's not a bigger initiative. I think it's four very distinct steps. So the first step to get out of this and break the system in a good way, positive way. First, build measurement that your leaders trust. Again, you can use NOVA and UpKeep Intelligence to help out with a lot of this. If you're unsure how to do it, where to do it, if it takes too much time, you heard from one of our customers, Selina, that this is actually could be one of the easiest times to do this. Maintenance has the ability to be a revenue center when you can tie activities with what you do with defensible ROI. The second thing, the second step to break the system is protect planned work. I mean, it was awesome hearing from you, Selina, where you guys just took 2 weeks and said, we're going to take these 2 weeks, we're going to protect this planned work, we're going to come out with great documentation, and that's going to be our jumping off point to drive better insights, intelligence. A lot of teams, it's very, very hard to do that, but it seems like that's what, one thing that companies, teams should do to just like protect a protect a preventive maintenance window. Um, the third step here is invest in workforce capability and knowledge transfer. You build these apprenticeship programs, you partner with schools, you capture this knowledge, and then don't just expect that contractors are going to fill the gap. Instead, know that this is part of your system, your company, your institutional knowledge. And then ultimately, what we just talked about here is when you have all of this, you can apply technology, you can apply intelligence and AI to actually scale people execution. And I actually think this order matters of, what to do. We have the report. It has the entire playbook for how to implement every single one of these steps. But I've talked lots. And I'm excited for you all to read the report because it does go into much more detail than, what we covered today. Um, the report has everything from breakouts by company size, industries, multi-site versus single site. There's an entire section in the report where it goes over this like very practical playbook, um, not just like what people do, but how. And it's this step-by-step framework that you can actually implement. And then we also have these maturity models inside the report where you can assess where you are on this maturity curve, because that'll also help you prioritize what to do next. And then we kind of close it out. There's this whole section that I'm also very excited about is like what's coming in 2027, what's coming in 2028, because we only scratch the surface and there's so much more happening right now. The industry is, just changing so rapidly, faster than I've ever seen it. Um, what you heard from today, or what you heard from me for today, was just a headline version. So download the report. We're going to drop it into the chat right now. Let's see. Yeah. We're going to drop the link to the full report. I think it's like, 50 something pages. Feel free to read it, share it with your leadership team. Hopefully you can use this to start conversations about where you are, where you need to go. Um, the execution gap that we talked about, the single source of competitive advantage in physical operations, again, is going to be people. It's going to be how you leverage your people to utilize the importance of maintenance, drive leadership, confidence. This is all part of the system. Um, I know that I'm like right up on time. Shoot, we're probably not gonna have much time for Q&A, but the last thing that I'll say here is just to summarize, the organizations that ultimately succeed are those that build the measurement systems, you protect planned work, you invest in capabilities, and then you ultimately scale with technology. These are going to be the companies that I feel like are going to be very, very successful for the long term. And the goal is to be one of those. So thank you everyone for joining me on today's session. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. As usual, Very well presented. If you agree with me, could you just put a little 10 or something in the chat? Just to let Ryan know how well he did. So thank you for that, sir. I think, as you said, we're probably out of time for the questions. We have a few. So if you did put one in the chat or the Q&A box, rest assured we'll get back to you and we'll get that answered. So we don't have time right now. We'll leave you be to your next meeting or your next piece of work you need to do. We'll get that over to you. Like we said, the recording for today will be sent to you by email along with the report. Get your copy, have a read through, have a good time with it. We're right on time, so I'm going to get us out of it. Thanks very much for your attention. If you made it this far, if you're watching the recording, go enjoy the report. With that, thank you, Ryan. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone watching.
Selena.
Thank you, Selina.
You bet. Thanks.
All right.
And we
Have a
will
good
see
rest of
you
your
on the
day.
next one,
Appreciate
everyone.
it.
Thank you.